America doesn't need animation studios. Sometimes real life already has anvils falling. Stay with this one because every story gets closer to a deleted Looney Tunes episode. 1. Cleveland released 1.5 million balloons. Then reality filed a complaint. In 1986, Cleveland decided the best way to raise charity money was to release nearly 1.5 million helium balloons into the sky at once. On paper, it sounded cheerful. In real life, it was like giving the weather a confetti cannon and no adult supervision. The balloons rose beautifully. Then a cold front pushed them back down over the city, Lake Erie, roads, buildings, and nearby areas. Suddenly, Cleveland wasn't hosting a celebration. It was starring in a cartoon where the sky had dandruff. Traffic was disrupted, horses reportedly panicked, and the balloons complicated rescue efforts on the lake. What was supposed to be a bright civic moment became a floating reminder that more balloons is not always a strategy. It was charity, spectacle, and accidental slapstick all tied together with string. America looked up and said, "Aw," then immediately said, "Oh no." 2. Boston was once attacked by molasses. On January 15, 1919, Boston's North End experienced one of the strangest disasters in American history. A massive tank holding about 2.3 million gallons of molasses burst open. And this wasn't a slow pancake drizzle. A wall of molasses reportedly surged through the streets at around 35 miles per hour, killing 21 people and injuring about 150. It sounds like a joke until you realize it was deadly serious. Basically, if Willy Wonka directed a disaster movie with zero safety inspectors. Buildings were damaged, streets were buried in sticky chaos, and cleanup became a nightmare because you can't exactly sweep up industrial syrup with a broom and a positive attitude. The event later helped push stronger construction and engineering standards, which is a very American ending. We needed a tidal wave of dessert ingredient before someone said, maybe tanks should be built properly. 3. The 1984 Olympics opened with a real jetpack man. At the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, America looked at a normal opening ceremony and said, "Not enough Saturday morning cartoon energy." So, Bill Suter flew into the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum using a Bell Aerosystems rocket belt. Not a movie prop, not a theme park illusion. A real man, strapped to a real rocket belt, flying into a stadium like the national anthem had unlocked a bonus level. The Smithsonian notes that Suter flew the Bell rocket belt at major events, including the 1984 Olympic opening ceremony, and even appeared with it in the James Bond film Thunderball. The whole thing lasted only moments because early jetpacks were less future of transportation and more briefly escaping gravity before gravity calls security. But for one glorious minute, America became a live-action cartoon. Crowds cheering, music booming, and one guy proving that safety briefings are optional when patriotism has a jet engine. 4. Niagara Falls. Once stopped flowing overnight. Most people think Niagara Falls is one of those things you can always count on. The sun rises, taxes arrive, and millions of gallons of water crash over the cliffs every minute. Except, in 1848, that last part suddenly stopped. People woke up expecting the familiar roar, only to find an eerie silence. The Niagara River had nearly run dry because strong winds pushed massive sheets of ice into the mouth of the river at Lake Erie, creating a natural ice dam. For nearly 30 hours, one of North America's greatest natural wonders looked like someone had turned off the faucet. Locals wandered onto the exposed riverbed, collecting rocks and artifacts that had been underwater for generations. Some even crossed parts of the river on foot, because apparently nothing says good decision like strolling where a waterfall usually lives. Then the ice dam finally broke. The water came rushing back, and everyone suddenly remembered why waterfalls have a healthy respect for personal space. It was one of those rare moments when Mother Nature looked like she'd accidentally hit the pause button before casually pressing play again. 5. The Pentagon once lost track of its own budget. By billions. The Pentagon is one of the largest office buildings on Earth. It has thousands of employees, endless hallways, and enough paperwork to make a filing cabinet cry. So perhaps it shouldn't be shocking that, over the years, financial audits have uncovered accounting problems involving enormous sums of money. One of the most famous examples came in 2001, when then-Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld acknowledged that the Department of Defense couldn't properly account for trillions of dollars in transactions because of outdated accounting systems and incomplete records. Now, contrary to internet myths, this didn't mean truckloads of cash literally disappeared into thin air. It meant the bookkeeping was so tangled that auditors couldn't reliably trace where every transaction had gone. Still, imagine telling your spouse, "Honey, I can't explain where a few $1 trillion went." Most people would be sleeping on the couch for life. America somehow managed to turn accounting into an escape room where even the accountants couldn't find the exit. It's the financial equivalent of losing your car keys, except the keys are worth more than the GDP of many countries. 6. A town went to war over a pig. History usually remembers wars over land, power, or religion. In 1859, the United States and Britain almost stumbled into armed conflict because of one hungry pig. On San Juan Island, a British-owned pig wandered into an American farmer's garden and started helping itself to his potatoes. The farmer, Lyman Cutler, had finally had enough and shot the pig. Unfortunately, the pig belonged to an employee of the Hudson's Bay Company, and suddenly a simple farm dispute exploded into an international diplomatic crisis. Both governments sent soldiers to the island. At one point, hundreds of American troops faced British warships in a tense military standoff, all because one pig apparently couldn't resist free vegetables. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. Neither side wanted to start a full-scale war over livestock, and negotiations eventually settled the dispute peacefully. Today, it's remembered as the Pig War, one of history's most ridiculous near conflicts. Imagine explaining to future generations that two global powers nearly opened fire because one particularly ambitious pig decided potatoes were worth risking international relations. 7. The CIA tried to turn cats into spies during the Cold War. Both the United States and the Soviet Union chased some wildly creative intelligence ideas. One of America's strangest projects became known as Acoustic Kitty. The CIA invested millions of dollars attempting to train a cat to secretly record conversations. Engineers surgically implanted a tiny microphone in the cat's ear, a radio transmitter near its skull, and a long antenna inside its tail. On paper, it sounded brilliant. After all, nobody suspects the neighborhood cat. Reality, however, turned out to be less cooperative. Cats, unlike secret agents in spy movies, don't particularly care about national security. They care about food, naps, and ignoring instructions. Reports indicate the first field test ended almost immediately when the cat wandered away from its assignment, and according to widely repeated accounts, it was struck by a taxi. Whether every detail has been exaggerated over time, the project itself was very real and was eventually abandoned. Sometimes history reminds us that billions of dollars worth of human intelligence still loses to a cat deciding it has absolutely no interest in following orders. 8. America once built a plane. Powered by nuclear energy. At least it tried. The 1950s were an incredible decade for optimism. Americans believed nuclear power could solve almost everything. Your electricity? Absolutely. Space travel? Why not? Airplanes? Sure, let's give that a shot too. The US government launched the Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Program, hoping to create bombers capable of staying in the air for weeks without refueling. Engineers even built an experimental aircraft, the Convair NB-36H, that carried a functioning nuclear reactor on board for testing. Thankfully, the reactor never powered the engines. It was carried only to study radiation shielding because everyone involved realized that crashing a flying nuclear reactor into a neighborhood would create a customer complaint unlike any in history. The aircraft completed dozens of successful test flights before the entire concept was abandoned. Advances in missiles made giant nuclear-powered bombers less practical, and the engineering challenges were enormous. Looking back, it's wonderfully American. Someone looked at an airplane and thought, "You know what this needs? A reactor." Thankfully, someone else eventually replied, "Maybe let's not." 9. The Army once tested a bomb filled with bats. If someone pitched this idea in Hollywood, the producer would probably ask them to tone it down. But during World War II, the US military actually developed a plan called Project X-Ray, which involved thousands of live bats carrying tiny incendiary devices. The idea came from a Pennsylvania dentist named Lytle Adams, who believed bats could fly into Japanese buildings, many of which were constructed with wood and paper, and accidentally start hundreds of fires at once. Believe it or not, the military loved the concept. Thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats were collected, tiny timed explosives were designed, and real test flights began. During one famous test in New Mexico, several bats escaped before the countdown. They flew into nearby buildings, where their miniature bombs ignited unexpected fires. The experiment accidentally proved the idea actually worked, just not in the way anyone intended. One military building reportedly burned to the ground because of America's own flying fire squad. Eventually, the project was canceled as the Manhattan Project moved ahead. Looking back, it's astonishing that some of the brightest military minds in America spent years seriously discussing weaponized bats. History sometimes sounds less like a textbook and more like someone lost a bet. 10. The U.S. once built a fake town to blow it up. During the early years of the Cold War, America desperately wanted to understand what a nuclear explosion would do to an ordinary neighborhood. Instead of guessing, officials decided to build one. In the Nevada desert, government engineers constructed entire model suburbs complete with furnished homes, parked cars, appliances, grocery items, and even mannequins dressed like an average American family enjoying the 1950s dream. Everything looked perfectly normal, until the countdown reached 0. When the nuclear device detonated, cameras captured houses exploding, furniture flying through walls, and mannequins being launched across living rooms like characters in a Saturday morning cartoon. Scientists carefully studied which building materials survived and which ones instantly disappeared. The tests produced valuable engineering data, but they also created some of the strangest footage ever filmed. Smiling plastic families sat around dinner tables one second and were scattered across the desert the next. It's impossible to watch those films today without thinking someone mixed suburban life with a Looney Tunes episode directed by physicists. The neighborhood was fake, but the explosion certainly wasn't. 11. The Great Emu War had an American sequel. Sort of most people know about Australia's famous Emu War. America never officially declared war on birds, but in 1960 the U.S. Air Force found itself in a surprisingly similar battle, with tumbleweeds. At George Air Force Base in California, enormous tumbleweeds began rolling across the desert in such massive numbers that they blocked roads, damaged fences, trapped vehicles, and even interfered with military operations. Some piles reached 20 feet high. Soldiers who expected to defend America from Cold War threats instead spent days fighting giant balls of dried weeds with bulldozers, trucks, pitchforks, and even controlled burns. Imagine joining the Air Force expecting high-speed jets and secret missions, only to discover your biggest enemy was a plant doing cartwheels across the runway. The invasion became so severe that military crews worked around the clock simply to keep the base functioning. Nature had essentially launched a silent attack using nothing but wind and dead vegetation. No enemy army, no dramatic battle music, just thousands of oversized tumbleweeds reminding everyone that sometimes Mother Nature enjoys practical jokes far more than military strategy. 12. The Sears catalog could sell you an entire house. Today, people order phone chargers online without reading the reviews. 100 years ago, Americans were ordering entire houses through the mail. Between 1908 and the early 1940s, Sears, Roebuck & Company sold more than 70,000 mail-order homes. Customers flipped through the catalog, picked a design they liked, mailed in their payment, and soon railroad cars arrived carrying tens of thousands of numbered parts. Lumber, nails, windows, doors, shingles, staircases, everything needed to build a complete house was included. Think about how incredible that sounds. You could buy socks, a washing machine, and your future living room from the same catalog. Families assembled these homes themselves or hired local builders using detailed instruction manuals. Many of the houses are still standing today across the United States, proving they weren't cheaply made gimmicks. It feels wonderfully American. Somewhere around 1920, a father probably sat at the kitchen table and casually said, "Honey, I ordered us a new house." Then a freight train showed up carrying enough lumber to make the neighbors wonder if he'd accidentally purchased half the forest. 13. Hollywood once painted sheep green. When filmmakers need a perfect landscape today, computers do most of the work. In the early 20th century, Hollywood preferred a much stranger solution. While filming westerns in California during the silent film era and the early decades of sound movies, studios sometimes dyed sheep with harmless vegetable-based coloring to make hillsides appear greener and more visually dramatic on black and white film. Directors constantly searched for ways to create the perfect image long before digital effects existed. If nature refused to cooperate, they simply modified nature. Imagine being a rancher and watching a film crew politely ask if they could temporarily turn your flock into walking lawn decorations. Early Hollywood was full of wonderfully impractical solutions like this because filmmakers were inventing the industry as they went along. They experimented with painted roads, artificial snow made from unusual materials, oversized props, and every camera trick imaginable. America didn't always have computer-generated magic. Sometimes it just had optimistic directors, determined crews, and sheep wondering why everyone suddenly cared so much about interior decorating. 14. New York once accidentally invented. Rush hour for elephants. Long before cars dominated American streets, cities were filled with horses, wagons, streetcars, and occasionally elephants. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, traveling circuses regularly marched elephants through city streets between railroad yards and performance grounds. In New York City, these massive processions often stopped traffic, attracted huge crowds, and created scenes that looked more like animated cartoons than ordinary mornings. Office workers heading to work might suddenly find themselves standing beside an elephant waiting patiently at an intersection while police officers tried to keep everything moving. The most famous circus processions, especially those involving Barnum and Bailey, became major public spectacles. Children skipped school to watch, adults crowded sidewalks, and newspapers covered the events like holiday parades. It's difficult to imagine today's commuters calmly accepting a traffic delay because 17 elephants needed to cross Broadway. Yet for decades, that was simply part of American city life. Before skyscrapers fully defined New York, there were mornings when the largest thing on the street wasn't a bus. It was an elephant carrying performers toward another sold-out show. 15. Alaska. Once became America's biggest practical joke. When the United States purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867 for $7.2 million, many Americans thought the government had completely lost its mind. Newspapers mocked the deal mercilessly. Critics called it Seward's Folly and Seward's Icebox, after Secretary of State William H. Seward, who negotiated the purchase. To many people, Alaska looked like nothing more than endless snow, frozen wilderness, and mountains nobody wanted. They couldn't understand why the government had spent millions on what seemed like the world's largest freezer. If social media had existed, the memes would have lasted for years. Then reality quietly ruined the joke. Gold discoveries brought thousands of prospectors north during the Klondike Gold Rush. Later came enormous reserves of oil, natural gas, seafood, timber, and other valuable resources. Alaska eventually proved to be one of the most strategically important and resource-rich regions in North America. History has a wonderful sense of humor. America laughed at buying Alaska, right before discovering it had accidentally purchased one of the greatest bargains in its history. Sometimes the cartoon ending turns out to be the smartest decision of all. 16. The United States once accidentally dropped a nuclear bomb on itself. Nothing says cartoon logic quite like dropping your own bomb on your own backyard. During the Cold War, the U.S. Air Force experienced several accidents involving nuclear weapons, known as broken arrow incidents. One of the most famous occurred in 1958 near Savannah, Georgia. A B-47 bomber collided with another military aircraft during a training mission. To safely land the damaged bomber, the crew was ordered to jettison its Mark 15 nuclear bomb into Wassaw Sound. Fortunately, the bomb's nuclear core had not been installed, meaning there was no risk of a nuclear explosion. Still, the conventional explosives and the massive steel casing disappeared into the water, where they have never been conclusively recovered. Imagine explaining to future generations that somewhere off the Georgia coast lies a missing nuclear bomb, because two military aircraft had a very expensive traffic accident. The event became one of several reminders that handling nuclear weapons required something stronger than optimism and checklists. America spent decades preparing for the end of the world while occasionally misplacing pieces of it. Only in the Cold War could "We lost the bomb" become an official government report instead of the plot of a Saturday morning cartoon. 17. San Francisco accidentally created the world's crookedest street. Some streets are designed by engineers. Lombard Street in San Francisco looks like it was designed by someone trying to draw with their non-dominant hand. Surprisingly, its famous zigzags weren't built as a tourist attraction. In the early 1920s, the natural slope of the hill proved far too steep for most automobiles to climb or descend safely. Rather than flatten the hill, an impossible task, city planners added 8 incredibly tight switchbacks. The result solved the problem beautifully, but it also created one of America's strangest landmarks. Every year, millions of visitors stand at the top wondering whether they're looking at a road or a roller coaster designed by accountants. Drivers creep downhill at walking speed while tourists line the sidewalks taking photos from every angle. Residents have become experts at patiently watching rental cars attempt turns that somehow seem impossible, despite thousands of successful examples before them. What started as a practical engineering solution accidentally became one of America's most recognizable roads. It's proof that sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points is apparently 8 sharp turns and a postcard. 18. The government once exploded. Hundreds of houses on purpose. In the 1950s, the Atomic Energy Commission wanted to know exactly how ordinary American homes would survive a nuclear blast. Their solution wasn't to build computer models. Computers weren't nearly advanced enough yet. Instead, officials constructed full-sized suburban houses in the Nevada desert, complete with furniture, televisions, refrigerators, canned food, and lifelike mannequins posed as happy families. Then they detonated nuclear devices nearby. Operation Doorstep became one of the most surreal scientific experiments ever conducted. Cameras recorded roofs lifting into the air, living rooms disappearing in seconds, and entire neighborhoods being transformed into piles of lumber. Engineers carefully analyzed which construction methods survived best, hoping future homes could be built to withstand similar attacks. Watching the footage today feels strangely unreal. Everything looks like an ordinary suburban neighborhood until the shockwave arrives, turning peaceful family life into instant chaos. It resembles a cartoon where someone lights an impossibly large stick of dynamite, except every frame is completely real. Thankfully, America eventually realized that preventing nuclear war was far more practical than designing stronger coffee tables. 19. The CIA tried to spy on the Soviets with a fake tree. The Cold War inspired some remarkably creative thinking. Satellites were still developing, drones didn't exist, and every piece of intelligence mattered. So the CIA came up with a wonderfully unusual solution: build a fake tree. Along sections of the Soviet border, intelligence teams secretly installed artificial tree trunks that blended into nearby forests. Hidden inside were sophisticated cameras and electronic sensors powered by batteries and solar panels. To anyone walking past, they looked like ordinary trees. Inside, however, they quietly collected information on military movements and transmitted valuable data. Building the fake trees required incredible attention to detail. Engineers studied local bark patterns, branch shapes, and even weather damage so the disguises would survive close inspection. One suspicious forester could ruin years of work. The entire operation sounds like something Wile E. Coyote would order from a military surplus catalog. Yet it reflected the extraordinary lengths intelligence agencies went to during the Cold War. Sometimes the world's most advanced espionage technology wasn't hidden in a briefcase or a watch. It was standing quietly in the forest, pretending to photosynthesize. 20. The Liberty Bell broke before it became famous today. The Liberty Bell is one of America's most recognizable symbols. Tourists travel thousands of miles to admire its famous crack. Ironically, that crack is exactly what transformed an ordinary bell into a legend. The bell was originally cast in London in the 1750s and shipped across the Atlantic to Philadelphia. Unfortunately, during its very first public test ring, it cracked. Imagine ordering the most important bell in the colonies only to have it fail immediately. Local metalworkers John Pass and John Stowe recast it twice before producing a version that could actually be used. For decades, the bell served its purpose without attracting much national attention. The large crack visible today developed much later after years of regular use. By the 19th century, abolitionists embraced the Liberty Bell as a powerful symbol of freedom, giving it the iconic status it still holds. America somehow turned a manufacturing defect into one of its greatest national treasures. Most companies issue refunds when products crack. Americans built museums, printed postcards, and invited millions of visitors to admire it instead. 21. Las Vegas was almost built around atomic tourism. Only in America could a nuclear explosion become a vacation attraction. During the 1950s, the Nevada test site regularly conducted above-ground nuclear tests just outside Las Vegas. Rather than hide from them, many casinos leaned into the spectacle. Hotels advertised the testing schedules, rooftop viewing parties became popular, and tourists woke up before sunrise to watch mushroom clouds rise above the desert horizon from a safe distance. Some casinos even served atomic cocktails, while beauty pageants crowned contestants with titles inspired by the atomic age. Souvenir shops sold postcards featuring mushroom clouds, and visitors treated the tests almost like fireworks displays. Looking back, the entire era feels surreal. Families traveled to America's entertainment capital, enjoyed dinner, watched a spectacular nuclear detonation on the horizon, and then returned to the casino for live music and blackjack. Thankfully, attitudes toward radiation changed as scientists learned more about its long-term health risks, and above-ground testing in Nevada eventually ended. Still, for a brief moment in American history, one of the world's most destructive weapons somehow became part of the tourism industry. If that's not cartoon logic brought to life, it's hard to imagine what is. 22. America once tried to make it rain. With dry ice, farmers have been praying for rain for thousands of years. America looked at that tradition and thought, let's involve airplanes. In the late 1940s, scientists working with General Electric, including Nobel Prize-winning chemist Irving Langmuir and researcher Vincent Schaefer, began experimenting with cloud seeding. The idea was surprisingly simple. Drop dry ice or silver iodide into suitable clouds to encourage ice crystals to form, increasing the chance of precipitation. Early demonstrations attracted enormous public attention, and suddenly it seemed as though humans might finally be able to negotiate with the weather. Of course, reality proved much more complicated. Sometimes the clouds responded, sometimes they ignored everyone completely. Yet newspapers eagerly covered the experiments, making it sound as if rain had become another government service. People imagined future forecasts reading, sunny until noon, scheduled shower at 3. The science behind cloud seeding remains real and is still used in certain places today under specific conditions. But the early excitement felt wonderfully optimistic. America briefly believed the atmosphere was just another machine waiting for someone to find the instruction manual. 23. The Golden Gate Bridge was painted and never really stopped. Most people assume the Golden Gate Bridge was painted once, admired, and left alone. The truth is much funnier. Since opening in 1937, the bridge has required constant maintenance because salty ocean air relentlessly attacks exposed steel. Its famous international orange color isn't just beautiful, it also helps protect the structure from corrosion while remaining highly visible in San Francisco's fog. For decades, painters continuously worked across different sections of the bridge. This gave rise to one of America's most famous myths, that by the time workers finished painting one end, it was already time to start over. While modern maintenance schedules are more organized than the legend suggests, painting and repairing the bridge truly is an ongoing job. Imagine having a home improvement project that literally never ends. Somewhere, a homeowner complains about repainting the garage every 10 years. Meanwhile, the Golden Gate Bridge quietly replies, "That's adorable." It perfectly captures America's relationship with its landmarks. Building something spectacular is only half the challenge. Keeping it alive through decades of wind, fog, storms, and salty Pacific air is the real marathon. 24. The Hoover Dam shrinks and grows. Every single day, concrete seems like the most stubborn material on Earth. Build something out of it, and it should stay exactly where you left it. The Hoover Dam politely disagrees. Completed in 1936, the massive structure experiences tiny but measurable movements every day. During the hot Nevada summers, the concrete expands as temperatures rise. At night and during cooler months, it contracts again. The total movement is only a fraction of an inch, but engineers carefully monitor it because even giant structures obey the laws of physics. It's strangely comforting. One of America's greatest engineering achievements is quietly stretching and relaxing like an old man getting comfortable in his recliner. Visitors standing on top never notice anything unusual. The dam feels completely solid beneath their feet. Yet deep inside, millions of tons of concrete are constantly responding to changes in temperature. It's a reminder that even the most permanent-looking creations are alive in their own mechanical way. If cartoons taught us that giant dams never move, reality delivers a better joke. Even America's biggest walls need a little room to breathe. 25. The White House had a very unusual lawnmower. Before noisy riding mowers became common, keeping the White House lawn perfectly trimmed required a different solution. For many years during the 19th century, government workers occasionally used sheep to graze sections of the White House grounds. The animals quietly handled the landscaping while naturally fertilizing the grass at the same time. During World War I, President Woodrow Wilson even brought a flock of sheep back to the White House grounds. Maintaining perfectly manicured lawns with gasoline-powered equipment wasn't considered essential during wartime, and the wool from the sheep was auctioned to raise money for the American Red Cross. Imagine walking past the White House expecting to see Secret Service agents and instead finding sheep casually eating lunch on the South Lawn. It sounds like something from a children's book, yet it was a practical decision that saved labor and supported the war effort. Sometimes the smartest government program isn't complicated at all. Sometimes it's just letting hungry animals do exactly what hungry animals have always done. Only America could accidentally make the world's most famous front yard resemble a peaceful family farm. 26. One tiny town accidentally became the UFO capital of America. Roswell, New Mexico, was just another quiet desert town until the summer of 1947. After strange debris was discovered on a nearby ranch, the local Army airfield initially announced that personnel had recovered a flying disc. Within hours, officials changed the story, saying the debris actually came from a weather balloon. That correction should have ended the conversation. Instead, it launched one of the greatest mysteries in American pop culture. Over the decades, theories multiplied. Books, television specials, documentaries, and movies transformed Roswell into the unofficial capital of extraterrestrial speculation. Scientists generally agree the debris likely came from a classified military balloon connected to Project Mogul, a secret program designed to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. But by then, public imagination had already taken control. Today, the town fully embraces its unusual reputation. Visitors find alien-themed museums, festivals, murals, restaurants, and gift shops selling everything from green plush toys to flying saucer coffee mugs. Whether you believe the official explanation or not, one thing is undeniable. America turned a confusing newspaper headline into an industry that has lasted for nearly 80 years. 27. The Statue of Liberty was originally meant to be something completely different. The Statue of Liberty feels inseparable from New York Harbor. It's difficult to imagine her standing anywhere else. Yet before sculptor Frederick Auguste Bartholdi began designing America's most famous monument, he had proposed a giant lighthouse statue for the entrance to Egypt's Suez Canal. His vision featured a colossal robed woman holding a light to guide ships entering one of the world's busiest waterways. Financial difficulties prevented Egypt from moving forward with the project, and the idea quietly faded away. Years later, Bartholdi reimagined the concept for the United States, where France presented the finished statue as a gift celebrating friendship and liberty. Think about how different history could have been. New York might never have had Lady Liberty, while travelers sailing through the Suez Canal would have been greeted by one of the world's greatest landmarks instead. Sometimes history doesn't follow a perfect blueprint. It takes a wrong turn, misses one opportunity, and accidentally creates something even more iconic somewhere else. That's probably the most American ending imaginable. A second chance becoming the version everyone remembers. Reality wrote these stories first. Which American cartoon moment deserves the gold medal? Tell me below.